Thank you for tuning in to Backyard Conversations. I'm your host, Craig Scheller, owner of Scheller Outdoor Living in Kansas City, Missouri. My hope is to combine my years of experience and network for a podcast focused on elevating the outdoor living industry. Let's get started. All right, so we are here with a bonus episode of Backyard Conversations, and I somehow got the big dog in hardscaping, Andy Mulder, on the show. Welcome, Andy.
What's going on, man?
How you doing?
Definitely not a big dog, but thank you.
Well, I appreciate
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I appreciate you taking the time, and it's been really fun watching your stuff this year, and I'm just really blown away. I honestly, first of all, I'm a big fan of what you do. Your work, the effort you put into it, the attention to detail, but also how you operate your business, and everything's just top of the line. And I appreciate watching you and seeing that. And you're definitely a leader in the industry, and appreciate you doing that with such class. So
thanks, man. Appreciate that.
No problem. So back in October, during the week of H&A, my guys and I came up to see your project, and unreal in person. So, and it's one of those things where you watch your stories and your YouTube videos and kind of the process of the project starting in, was it February? You kind of got started there.
End of February.
Yeah. And then just getting there and like realizing what you're trying to share through drone shots and your phone and your GoPro or whoever you're taking your videos, you just can't capture it. It's really hard to capture the project. So that was really cool to see in person. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just kind of walking us through the process of this project. I mean, this is an enormous, epic project. And if you'd kind of walk us through like design, kind of how you estimating and sourcing materials and estimating time. How do you process that in such a large project?
Oh, man. So I've had that question asked about 150 times. What I think a lot of people don't understand is that project, it was probably 2 years in the making. And if there's one thing I've learned about bigger projects is that it doesn't happen fast, and you can't just push it through, and it's never for sure until it's for sure.
Right. Exactly.
I've spent a lot of times getting really excited about big jobs, and then they don't happen. I have also found that clients that are going to do large projects think about things differently than other people do, and so they're very methodical, and they put a lot of thought into what they're doing and when they're doing it. And so that's also another reason why it's hard to land big jobs, I think.
Yes.
So it started, I was put in touch with the customer through another contractor friend of mine. And he was going to do some work for them, and they were looking at someone to redo their back patio around their pool deck. And I had done work the last year. We did a pool job with the one that the pool contractor was a nightmare. That's on the same golf course as the job as this job, and my two clients know each other. So my client had already known about me and my work. And so I ended up going to meet with them. I believe this was in maybe it's a year and a half, whatever. At least a year in the making. I went and met with them in like July or something of maybe 21 or 20. I don't even know. It was a long time ago.
Right.
And I looked at the project. We were really busy, but I started working with them on the design process. And really, it was mostly just the backyard at that time, just redoing the pool deck. And so I worked on putting that in 3D. And I believe in the fall of 2020, that would have been right. Yeah. Fall of 2020 is when I first presented the backyard design. And then we talked about, maybe redesigning the front or something, or what could that look like? And and it just, so I ended up just designing the pool area and then the front of the house. And then uh, I thought it was a for sure thing. I thought it was 100% going to happen in about December of 2020. Yeah, that was when it was. It was like we had gone back and forth. We had done some negotiations on the contract and the scope of work and what was going to happen, and then I was waiting on him to sign the final contract, and then he ended up pulling. I didn't hear from him for a couple weeks through the holidays, and then he told me he wanted to um, put the project on hold, and it was mostly due to the election and what was, how was that going to affect his business and things like that, and he just
Sure.
wanted to wait and hold off, and that was fine, and so that was a big lesson for me again, and like I said, you don't know, it. I thought it was a done deal, and then
Right.
it wasn't, just like that,
Yeah.
and I didn't know if it would ever happen um again, and I thought, okay, well, you know I guess it just wasn't meant to be. And at that time, I was extremely. It would have just that part would have been the biggest job we had ever done. I mean,
Yeah. Sure.
it's a huge scope of work, just the house. And so then I didn't hear anything for 6 or 8 months through all of 2021. There was no communication until the fall of 2021, and he got a hold of me again and said, "Hey, we're looking at. I think we'd like to, work on doing this in the spring of 2022, and so, let's sit down and look at the design again and see if, there's things we want to add and so on and so forth." And so we had a meeting, some other things got added, and then I went there. I went there another time I think, to get the final contract signed and maybe a deposit check. I don't really remember what was happening, but I was then told that he was able to secure the property where the pond is now,
Oh, wow.
and he was able to buy that, and he wanted to extend the golf course pond um, to closer to his house, and um, so they were able to do that. So then I was like, holy cow, like this project just got way bigger, because he's like, well, I said, well, there's gonna obviously need to be a huge wall, and there was a forest where the pond was. So I when I came there that time, the forest was taken down already. Like, it had probably been a month since I had been there, and in that time, that property had been purchased, and he cleared the forest,
Wow.
and and they wanted to. So that was the only bummer part of all this is I don't have any pictures of the forest
Yeah.
before it was taken down, because I didn't know it was happening, and so I don't have any like drone shots of it fully before, in that part of the pond. That's a huge bummer. I keep looking around for like shots that I may have taken, because it's crazy. I had taken before photos in 2019, but I was only focusing on the pool area, and then
Sure.
I came back in 2020 or 2021, and I took pictures of the whole front of the house and everything, because then that part became part of the project. And then at the end of 2021 or beginning of 2022, or it would have been January, is when I came there and the forest was taken down. And then I took photos of that. So I have all these photos of, 2 years of different times I had gone there. Um, and every time you're like, I don't know, am I wasting my time? Is this actually going to happen?
Yeah.
How am I going to, you know, you go back and forth on, when do I decide, yeah, or when do I know this is going to happen so I can tell other people I'm booked, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was a huge blessing. Like, I always look back and everything happens for a reason, but the work that we did in 2021, there's no way I would have been able to take on this project in 2021, because I had all these other things that happened. Then I was swamped all of 2021. It's like, but then this year and the timing of it, and I didn't have anything booked for 2022 when in January, I had nothing booked fully. And so I was able to, I needed to know if this was
Yeah.
happening by January. If you're going to, at least for me, I usually don't like really book much work until like February. It seems like for us, like I in the past had never been carried a lot of work over season. And that was fine. I was never worried about that. But it just it was a blessing that he waited until when he did for my schedule too, because I
Right.
didn't have prior commitments that I had one job that we had booked, and we ended up doing that, throughout the season. But anyway, so then I went there. He told me about the whole golf course and pond part of it and all that, and his company, they own the golf course. So the company that he owns, they own the course. So um, that's how everybody is asked, like, does he own that? And that's how it all works.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
um, but anyways, they wanted to, as the golf course, they wanted to expand the pond, and it makes that golf hole, it makes it a lot harder. There's a lot of reasons why they did what they've done
Sure.
here. And it's a huge improvement on the course as a whole. So really it's two different projects. It was the golf course, the pond part is the golf course, and then the house is his house, of course.
Right.
And he wanted to see the golf course. He could never see the golf course from where he lived. Well, I mean, that's a beautiful view. I mean, you saw it.
Right.
So anyway, then I began. So the house part of the job was 100% happening, and then I began working on the design for the pond part, which is a whole giant scope in itself. And I knew that the house part of the job was going to take a while. I mean, that part of the job would have been, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of my season, I guess, or half my season. And then, to come in and find out about this pond part, and really the pond part of the job, they were already clearing the forest, and the excavator was going to start excavating for the pond part. Um, that almost became they didn't want to have the golf course tore up all year long.
Right.
It's open to the public. So then that kind of took priority. But we did both projects at the same time. There was a lot of different moving parts. And so, we were able to jump back and forth. So then we worked on the design for that. And at that time I had planned on self-performing the water feature part of that. And it was smaller, much smaller than what it is now. And it wasn't near as complex and everything. And so we started, I mean, I don't know. I mean, where do you want me to go here? I mean, you could talk about this forever. I mean, that was
Yeah.
the process. That was the process of us meeting and how the project ended up going and how I got to meet, how I met them. It was literally just a good friend of mine does really nice, woodworking, and works for a lot of really great clients in that area where this job is. And he's referred a lot of great jobs to me. That the pool job that we did last year was a referral from him. And it's just, it takes a long time to secure projects that are larger. I mean, this is 10 times bigger than anything we've ever done, but it's the same. I mean, 2 years of back and forth, and me wondering, am I wasting my time? Am I not? I think it's 100%, and then it's 100% not. And,
Right.
it's all over the place.
I find I can relate to that in a very small way, but most of the projects we do are larger. So when I finish one, it's almost like every single one of them has been like, if I first met them in May, it's finished in May. If it's
the next year,
right, the next year, and then like this
Yeah.
one, the one we're finishing now towards the end of the year here. I think we first met and I closed that deal in it was like December, January last year, and we're going to finish up. So it's the larger jobs take. There is a process, and some of that has to do with time frame, and we have to order pools and all that stuff. But yeah, they do take a lot more time.
Yeah.
Not just to execute, but to like design and go through that process and plan and estimate and get the back and forth done, revisions and all those things. There's just a lot more moving parts to it.
Yeah, and people that are able and willing to do projects like that. Like I said, they're just more careful, and it just takes time. Like, you're just not gonna slam this out. It's just, and if there are people that are in a hurry like that, but typically all of my really great clients that we've done really awesome jobs they have not been in a hurry, and they're willing to wait, and they're willing to take the time to do it right. And pick the right selection, or wait for the right product, or whatever.
Exactly.
It's just a different group of people, and they don't get people aren't able to do these kinds of things and they're not like not smart people. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like,
Yes.
I don't know if I'm saying that the not, it's just, I don't know. I've just learned a lot from working with people that have the ability to do this kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
That makes sense.
So, I mean, you sell the job. Now you have to start like I'm sure in the estimating process you had a pretty good idea of the materials you needed, right? Because you're estimating
Yeah.
and
And
the
it's
time
funny
that goes
because
into it and all that.
the natural stone part of of this job, like the boulders and the weathered limestone, I don't remember fully. I really don't. I've tried to think how the process went because originally the front of the house and all the walls around the pool were all going to be Unilock old quarry wall or some kind of Unilock product. It was going to be a regular like
Yeah.
retaining wall.
Something you're familiar with.
Yeah, and which was fine, but I don't fully remember. I actually think when the pond part of the project came to be, I said, okay, well, they're the only products I'm building that wall is either Rosetta, like the outcropping wall that they
Right.
make, or it's gonna have to be out of natural stone because you just don't build something like that without something big.
Right.
Um, and so I think maybe that's when it started. Was I got some pictures of what the product looked like, and they liked it a lot. I'm like, okay, well, if we're gonna use this on the pond, I really think it would be some really cool to look from the course and look up because the house is up on a hill kind of from the course to be able to look up and see the same product going up the hill. I think, changing to a different material would look just wouldn't, it would look, I think, I just thought it would look better if it was all the same. And they liked that idea. And then around the pool area, um, I wanted areas where they could sit. And so that's why we incorporated, and I needed to build steps and all this stuff. Well,
Right.
then I need to use some kind of man-made product to make that happen. And that's how the boulder part kind of came to be. Um, but
Well,
that was all those changes happened in January. Um, it was fairly quick because once it was like, okay, he's doing this, then it was game on, right?
sure. Yeah.
It's January, and we had a ton of demo work to do, which we were able to. That's how we were able to start so early was
Right.
because we had all this demo work to do. So that's a whole nother part of the. That was a whole nother part of the story is like demographically where this is at and the subsoils and the scope of work and how I don't know. And there's so many things I could talk about, but as far as like material wise, as soon as we decided about the natural stone, I went to Earthworks in Missouri and saw my supplier, took me there, and I was there for 2 days. And they were all, of course, losing their minds about how many tons I was about to buy from them. So they were whining and dining and
Sure. Yeah.
showing me, the best time ever. And it was like sometimes I like I'm like, you guys are being ridiculous. Like, this is hilarious. It's just funny. Like I don't know. That's a whole other story. But anyways, so anyway, I went there, they toured, they gave me a tour of the quarry and where the material comes from. And then I was able to tag what I thought was a lot of pallets. I tagged like 150 skids of material, which at that, I was like, oh my word, there's so much. But then and I thought I had tagged the right product. I thought it seemed really big, but I hadn't spent a ton of time working with that material before.
Right.
And so I tagged what I thought was good stuff. And then it's just like, it's like my excavator. I thought it was really big when I bought it, but then when I get it in that pond and you
Yeah.
start moving boulders around, it's like, yeah, I probably could have had one double the size for this.
Yeah.
There was a lot of sleepless nights worrying about if I had the right stuff. Anyways, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how, you just I had to be this project taught me a lot about project management, and I had to spend so much time project managing in a way like ordering material on time and thinking. I had to always be thinking like 4 weeks ahead,
Sure.
4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I will say that these clients were so good about making decisions and sticking with their decisions. And I think that this project could have been so much harder for me if they weren't like that, because we had to make decisions so far in advance. Of course, with material how it is, all you can get a lot of things but you have to wait and you have to give enough time to get it. So like the pavers, like we decided what the pavers were going to be like in March, and I had them on site. I'm pretty sure, I swear I got them in April, and they sat there until October.
Right.
Um, and like I had so much material sitting there for a long time, but I didn't want to wait. Um, I required the same deposit that I require on every other job that I do. Um, so, and I did that because I knew I needed to pay for a lot of things really early.
Right.
So I had paid for the pavers and the joint sand and um, all the drainage stuff. So much material I had paid for months before I needed it, but I did that because I wanted it, and I wasn't going to play games where the supplier said, "Oh yeah, we got it set off to the side," or "Yeah, they have it at the factory. There's nothing to worry about." No, no, no.
Right.
I want it sitting in my job site because I have the money to pay for it, and I wanted the project to go really smooth. One, because it should go smooth if they're willing to spend that kind of money on landscaping. I need to make it a smooth process because that's what I'm trying to deliver, right? But one, and then two, it makes the job, it just goes smooth because the next, okay, we're coming up on the pavers, they're sitting right there. I'm not like, oh shoot, I should have ordered
Yeah.
them 2 weeks ago. Or then I call the supplier, be like, oh man, they said they had it, but it was so long they just decided to cycle the material and now they don't have it.
Right.
Like that stuff happens all the time.
Well, plus at the beginning of this year, we're still facing some fluctuating prices.
Oh
Like
yeah, and that's a whole
freight,
nother
and that's a
thing.
whole, yeah. Like you can
Like
lock in
I
your,
quoted,
yes.
I quoted the job in 2021. I
Right.
mean, there's December of uh, a good portion of the job. The house part of the job was quoted in December or November and December of 2021. And so that was another thing I wanted to, I absorbed a bunch of freight charges. I absorbed a couple, like I think I had one Unilock price increase. But again, that's a whole podcast in itself. Is like budgeting for or bidding on a job like this. But like I never once had to go to my client and say, I quoted this and it's more than I thought because
Right.
because of whatever. And
Right.
I think that was huge. That was a goal of mine too. It was like, okay, well, this load has an extra $50 delivery fee on it or whatever you want to
Right.
put on it. Like, I'm not going to go and tell them I need $50.
Right.
Like, it's
It's
ridiculous.
nickel and
Like,
diming. Yeah.
yeah, like that stuff doesn't matter. And that's why you charge enough money for some of this stuff, because he is much happier. They are much happier when you don't have to go to them than if you would have to. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because you did it so tight or whatever. Like that stuff all happens. But so that was going back to the materials. So that was why another reason why I ordered stuff so early was I didn't want to. If I would have had to pay Unilock at least 2 more price increases if I would have waited until I actually needed them.
Right.
And then like we were using Town Hall basalt, which is it's a really nice paver. It's what we did on all the driveway part and then all the banding. Well, that paver ended up being extremely hard to get at the end of the season, like extremely hard.
Right.
And I had like 2 semi-loads sitting on my job site for 4 months at least. And there was 2 times where I had other contractors call me and ask me if they could come and if they could buy a pallet off me because they knew I had a
Yeah.
bunch of.
Oh,
I'm like,
sure.
no, dude, I'm sorry. Like, I'm a really nice guy, but I need it.
Yeah.
I need it. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't need it until I'm done with this job. So if I'm done, then sure, if I have a pallet extra, we can do that. But I had to be smart in that way. Same with like PVC pipe or all our drainage pipe. It's like I had like a semi load of different PVC fittings and all kinds of stuff just come there and let it sit there. And we didn't need it for months. And,
Right.
the lighting and just so many different materials that I had to be so proactive about.
Did you have to store some of that stuff offsite, or were you able to keep it pretty much all there?
So that's another huge blessing about this job. One, it was on a cul-de-sac, and there was only one other house on the cul-de-sac, and him and my client are really, really good friends. And there was just my client had a lot of property, so I had enough room to store everything on the job site. The long story short, I had enough room to store. I never had anything come to my shop and sit and then bring it there. Um, I did that as, I mean, even for different things that we ended up bringing I have a extra enclosed trailer, our old maintenance trailer. I ended up bringing that there, and we used that as kind of a supplies trailer.
Nice.
So because I normally we keep stuff in the tool trailer. Well, that gets really old really fast.
Right.
And I had irrigation. I had all the irrigation parts sitting there 3 months before we needed it. Well, that's boxes and boxes of stuff. And then you have the lighting, and that's boxes and boxes, and all the lighting wire, and um all kinds of different things like the hideaway covers for the skimmer boxes on the pool, and like all these things that I had ordered so far in advance. Well, they need to stay dry and they need to stay safe, and I don't want them sitting at my shop, because the day we need them, because we switch tasks, all of a sudden they're going to be at the shop,
Right.
like I wanted everything there. So we stored all that small stuff in one of our other, it was an 18-foot enclosed trailer, and then everything else, there was enough room on site to store it. And then we also had the whole cul-de-sac basically as a hard surface to dump material on. And I mean, he had intended on repaving his driveway and the cul-de-sac, and so we didn't have to save the
Right.
asphalt.
Yeah.
I mean, like that was monster.
That's not a
To have
terrible
that.
idea, because we have a shop, and usually we're within 20 minutes. But like, yeah, when we start getting our lighting there, and or we get along in the day, and we're like, oh, we should have brought the lights with us, or we should have brought this with us, or that. It's like,
Right.
in the tool trailer, we have a 20-foot tool trailer too, and it's like we have the saws in there, or the all the different stuff, and then pool equipment or things that we don't want necessarily out sitting in
Well,
the
yeah.
weather. And it's like,
Right.
maybe I need a separate trailer just for just for
Right.
storage
And
for 2 months or whatever.
I was exactly, and I was going to be there so long that like I can't leave this. Some of the stuff is totally fine to be in the weather, but the
Right.
boxes deteriorate,
Exactly.
and then they're falling all over, and and then the job site looks messy.
Right.
And like that was something that I struggled with, like the whole job is like I tried to keep it like semi organized, but it looked like a bomb went
Yeah,
off
it's a
on that job
construction.
site.
That was a big construction project. That's
Yeah,
really
it
hard to
was
keep
huge.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the amount of time I spent having guys just like we have two part-time maintenance guys that do maintenance Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And so Wednesdays, those guys would come to our job site, and those part-time guys, I would literally like almost weekly, I had at least one guy walk around for an entire day and pick up garbage
Yeah.
and like broken pallet pieces and cut-offs of this or brick pieces or whatever, because like we were just going around the job site like wild men doing stuff. And I hate paying skilled guys to do cleanup. And so and we obviously would do that throughout the week, but then there was always at least once a week, it's like, dude, just go around and pick up garbage because
Yeah.
it looks disgusting and it's blowing around.
Right.
That was huge. Was the amount of trash on this job was just insane. Just insane. I mean,
So
just the pallets of boulders, the pallets coming out of the boulders.
yeah,
you know?
sure. And they're usually broken, or did they have
Oh, they're
cages on them, or
destroyed.
yeah?
No,
No.
they were just
Okay, just
the
destroyed.
amount of like they just
Yeah.
There was maybe 50 pallets that were salvageable on that job
Wow.
by the time we were done.
So along the way, you decided you didn't want to do the water feature, or you didn't have the time or capacity, and it was growing. So you brought in a sub for that.
Yeah.
So how many different subs or other trades? Because I know there was other things going on in the project, but how did you kind of work with that and facilitate that and make sure everybody was not on top of each other?
So my subs were the water feature, and then we had a sub that did the big catch basin. It was a big drainage catch basin we ended up installing. And then that was the only two of my subs, and our cleaning sub at the end that cleans up the job site. Other than that, the rest of the work was done by his company. They have a construction company.
Okay.
And so the rest of the work, the roof, was at other contractors. We still had to work around everybody, of course. My client managed the pool reno. I didn't have anything to do with that, and he managed all the roofing, the roof extension, the fence that had to go up was my client's contractor, and any electrical work and plumbing work was his department. That was part of the contract. So any plumbing or electrical work that I needed, he had to manage that and take care of that. And so that was really nice. It just took maybe a little bit. I mean, it didn't really matter once the contractors came there to do the work, I had to tell them what to
Right.
do. I mean,
Yeah.
not as far as not the roof part of that. That was, they designed that and took care of all that. I had nothing to do with that. And I had nothing to do with the driveway being paved, except for I, gave my advice when I was asked, and
Right.
then, and helping with layout and grade. Uh, I
Making sure
basically
you're ready for it.
yeah, making sure I'm ready for it, making sure, we all just work together on a lot of stuff because it was my job site. I mean,
Right.
it was all these moving parts. I didn't necessarily have to call and hire the person, but when they got there, I had to tell them what we were wanting and where we were wanting it and how I wanted it to be. Even with the pool contractor, it wasn't my contractor, but I was communicating through emails with the client and the pool contractor as when we wanted them there to redo the pool and what we needed from them as far as, we had to put a new bonding wire in, and we had to get them there to fix some of the skimmer, and then one of the lines got hit when we were excavating, and so
Sure.
they came and fixed that, and then pressure testing and everything. And so there was I spent a ton of time project managing,
Right.
like more than I just can't even explain. Like, there was most of the summer, yes, I was performing work, but there was lots of days where I was sitting in my truck working on the next task or the next change order or whatever. But so I guess you were asking about the subcontractor. So backing up to that, so as far as my subcontractor, there was a point when we started building the wall that I knew we started on one side and worked towards the water feature area. And as we started, I'm like, the project was already growing, and um, I was like, I can't do this. I don't have enough capacity to do this water feature,
Right.
um, and do everything else that we had to do. I just don't. I think we could do it, but I don't have the time. I really just don't have the time. Um, and so that's when I reached out to Joe from Splash of Life Landscaping. That's who did the water. They did the water feature, and I had known him from before, and I knew he had kind of gone out on his own and we hadn't talked in probably 2 years, but I knew he had gone out on his own and wanted to do more water feature stuff. And I'm like, I know this guy. I know what he can do. I've seen the work that he can do, and so we ended up meeting, and his mind works differently than, as far as like creative wise and like water feature wise, like he can just see so much more of that than I can.
Right.
And that just comes with experience. Um, and just doing more water features, you get really, I mean, I can look at other things and better than he could, or you know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Oh yeah, sure.
And so immediately I was like, this is the right move. We got to make this work. He was super excited about it. Like, he's really passionate about this kind of thing. And I'm like, this is what I need. I want him to do this. And so, long story short, he ended up redesigning the whole water feature area and suggested doing two different areas of falls, and one being more of uh, a a falls, like multiple falls, cascading waterfall with a stream, and then the other one would be more of like pooling areas, and then big falls in, a big drop into the water, and all these different ideas. And we went back and forth and made adjustments, and then presented that to the client, and they just loved it, and we're totally on board. And so, like, when I had quoted the pond part of the job, I never included the water feature originally,
Right.
and that was because the main reason I hadn't quoted that originally was because I didn't have nobody was giving me updated material pricing on liner.
Oh yeah.
And because everything was all over the place, and they're
Right.
like, well, no, we don't have real pricing on the liner yet, blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna I just left that off the bid and just said, that part of the project will be quoted once I get firmed up pricing. And I'm glad I did that because it just changed so much.
Right.
And my clients were very open to my ideas and any suggestions I had on changing something or adding something. Or it wasn't about the price, it was about making it amazing. And what it you know th- there's such a difference in the outcome of a project when you're able to work with somebody that has the ability to do the project like that and make it every detail is important. And we weren't cutting corners anywhere, and
Right.
they didn't want to cut corners anywhere. And then I believe that we got it to a point in our relationship where they trust me a lot, and they trust my ideas and what I'm going to suggest and why I'm going to suggest it. And so it just got to a point where, like, if I thought it was a really good idea, I would explain to them what it was and why I wanted to do it. And there was, yeah, they want to do it,
Yeah.
and it was so fun for me. Um, and that the biggest change to that job was really the water feature. That was the biggest amount of work change wise. Um, it just is a massive undertaking to do that much water feature stuff.
Right.
Uh,
And speaking of that, like change orders, like I'm just gonna guess from our conversations and from me being there and you telling us that story with the waterfall. I'm guessing you're writing change orders on this project that are larger than most people's projects. Like
yeah.
if I go to
Yeah.
a job and we say, okay, like on the one we're now on, the HOA didn't approve us to put like a shed type building up for a pool house. They wanted it
Okay.
to match the house. And so I had estimated a smaller building they just wanted a shed to store things in. So then it went from that to a pool house, quote unquote, because it had to be listed as that. It had to have stucco and stone. So like there was things I had to change in that, which was not a huge upgrade from what I had already planned. But you're adding water features. You're adding footage to the water features. You're adding, I don't know what all you added, but just kind
Yeah.
of talk about the process of,
There was 25 change
yeah.
orders or
So
something
let's talk
like
about
that.
the process of how you manage that and kind of relate that to you kind of shared how your customer was kind of all in, but like how do you take those to them when they've already know they're investing so much to begin with?
Well, really, it was anytime there was a change in the scope of work. Um, that's a change order,
Right.
right? I mean, there was a few things here and there that I absorbed, but we communicated so much. I can't even explain to you the amount of emails and text messages. We literally talked every single day. They're not there all the time. And so tons of communication via email and text, tons of video messaging. Um, I almost every day I would send them an update on what we had done if they weren't there or whatever, and explain to them what we are doing. Also, they follow me on Instagram, and so they would watch a lot of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool. And but as far as the change orders go, like, it really just um they own a company, right? A construction company,
Sure.
so they understand changing in the scope of work and what that means, and that there's going to be a price to any kind of change order. And so it really just came down to if he requested something or I had an idea for something, I would work up the quote for that. And if it required a little bit of design work, I would do the design. I would send them a screenshot. This is what I'm thinking. This is how much it's going to cost. And then I would send them a change order via email, and it's all signed via electronic signature, and then we would move forward with the change order. It was very clean, and I didn't do anything on that job. I'm really proud of this, in a fact that, like, if I was so busy, I could have really gotten behind on this job in those kinds of things and be like, okay, well, yeah, cool. He said he would do it. So let's just get it done. And then I never actually
Bro, yeah,
sending the change order and all that stuff. Right. And so I was really, and I owe a lot of thanks to my crew because we had the best crew ever this year. And I was able to spend the right amount of time project managing this job.
sure.
And so if there was a change order, like we really didn't ever do anything without it actually being signed. Maybe a couple things, but that was more towards the end. And that really came down to, I was just really, really busy. And I had confirmation like, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Like as far in writing and all that stuff, but everything had a formal change. Any kind of change had a formal change order. And they ranged from, you know, a couple $100 to, I mean, the whole waterfall, the whole
Right.
water feature, right? Big amounts of jobs. So they were all over the place
Yeah.
as far as what it was. But um, I think what's important too is we had a good design to start with that spelled out the scope of work. We had a good proposal that spelled out the scope of work so that there wasn't a lot of question on, well, I thought this was going to be included, or it doesn't really say if this part is included. Why do I have to sign a change order for that? Does that
Right.
make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. 'Cause,
Um,
so just for like, if there's people listening, I'm hoping there are, they're thinking, well, yeah, obviously you couldn't absorb these change orders, but I think as contractors, I've been super guilty of this, and this is one this year and last year. I've really tried to be more, um, exactly what you're saying. If it's not in the scope of work, and we're adding additional work to our scope, that's a change order.
right.
So I think too often, like even the same project, we've had more change orders on this particular project we're on now. This is why I kind of want to talk about it a little bit, but we were going to leave the concrete under their deck and just kind of work around it. And that was what was in the design. And we noticed when we were working a small hairline crack in the patio underneath, and there was no way for us to overlay it. It was really tight to the siding. So I went to him and I said, I think this would look best with the overall project if we go ahead and take this concrete out and put it with pavers and make everything look the same. It's something, honestly, if I look back at it, it's something I should have caught because I don't design my plan. So sometimes I don't necessarily see the whole thing. I just look at the plan. I say, this looks great. And then I
Mm-hmm.
take the take off and I go estimate it. So in my opinion, I could have looked at it and said, you know what? I should have caught this. This should not have been in, the plan, or it should have been in the original plan. But I just went to them and said, this was not included. Well, yeah, we kind of agree with you. How much would it be? So then I give them the price. I send them a change order. They agree to it. We added some walls along the pool that weren't in the original design, and some of it was functional, some of it was aesthetic. But at the end of the day, I think exactly what you said is important. If it's outside the scope of work, it has to be a change order. And I think too many times we go, oh, we're here, we'll buy the extra pallet of pavers, or we'll buy a pallet of block. Or you can't absorb all that as a company and expect to be profitable. And
No,
and you can't give work away. It just doesn't
no, right.
work. Yeah.
And it comes down like, I think sometimes the struggle with change orders is the client you're working for. Sometimes it's just like super difficult
Right.
or
Yes.
doesn't want to pay for it or whatever they want to do. Like, it just, you could have the same experience. You could do the same process and have two different experiences with two different clients.
Right.
Um, but that also comes down to picking the right clients too. I was very thoughtful of, like, if I'm going to sacrifice this much of my season into one project, I want to make sure these are the right people I want to work for.
Right.
And I knew when meeting them, I could tell that they were very good at making decisions, and that helps so much. We talked about that earlier, but like that plays into so many things, because when you come time to do a change order or something, it's like, hey, okay, how are they going to take a long time to decide, or are they going to not be able to pick out what they really want to pick out, or are they going to be, switching up what they want to order, and you already ordered it or whatever. Like all that stuff plays into how it's going to go. And so there's so much to be said about choosing your clients wisely,
I agree. Yes.
especially on bigger projects, because I have probably 7 large projects now that we've done. And by large, I would say over 200,000. And um, you're married to those jobs,
Oh yeah.
uh, and like big time for a long time.
Yes.
And there's one client that I have that if I were to go back, I wouldn't work for them again. But it didn't start off like that. And I don't know if I could have foreseen what has happened now, but other than that, like these people have all been, and I've just been really blessed to be able to work for really great people, but they can make or break every part of the project, you know, by how they are as a person. Right.
Yeah. And even
Um,
a
and
business. I mean, if you're not prepared in some way.
Oh, big time. I
Yeah.
mean, I would do this kind of a job again. I really would. Not the direct year after I did one, but you know, if I skipped a year and then did another one this big, I would do it, but it would have to be the same kind of people.
Right.
It just would. And
Yeah.
I would be so stinking careful to make sure it was, because um I just think it could go south so fast, and it starts with the change orders. I mean, I that's where you could start having issues, I
Right.
really think.
I agree.
And that's when you learn a lot about who you're working for, is when those kinds of things come up. Um, but it's got you know, you got to be professional. You got to have a detailed proposal that spells out the scope of work. You know, the you don't have to like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like I've just learned how to say things and how to describe things in a way that encompass what we're going to do, but don't paint us into a corner.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Um, I don't know. There's a million things you could talk about with that, but I think what matters is making sure that you're doing the change orders and making sure they're getting signed, and make like every proposal, every change order had a separate deposit. I didn't just do the change order and then bill the entire change order at the end of the job. Every change order was 50% down on the change order, and then the rest of that change, when that change order is done, I invoice for that change order, the
Yep.
full payment on that change order.
Yep.
You have to.
That's how we've been operating this year. It's made a huge difference because yeah, you get to the end of the job and they're like, yeah, they're done. We don't necessarily.
Yeah,
We
because
don't,
they have you have no they have
yeah.
no skin in the game then,
Yeah.
and all of a
Right.
sudden you have $20,000 or $200,000 or $10,000 in change orders, and you didn't collect any of that
Right.
money.
Yeah.
Well, now they could just say, no, I didn't really agree to that, or
Yeah.
no, I'm not paying that, or
Right.
whatever. And sure, okay, you go to court and you win eventually, or whatever you want to do. You have the paper trail, but that all takes massive amount of time.
Yes.
Like that stuff happens to people every day.
Yep. And I know you've been on many podcasts, and so I really appreciate you doing this and kind of talking about this project. But I know you've talked about how your finances are set up and being debt free. And myself, you know, we started 2 years ago, and I tell people I've justified some debt, right? And I don't know if that's the right word, but like we grew really fast, and
Yeah.
so I felt, you know, if I made good decisions and had, you know, a manageable payment with a good down payment and low interest rates, I've really tried hard to do that. I've also
Yeah.
I've taken some very large risk with that.
Yeah.
So, and I feel that this time, that's when I think when you feel debt is when you're going into winter, right? And you're like,
Oh,
I got
yeah.
to pay my guys, I got to pay my
Right.
payments, I got to keep my roof over my head. And
Right.
so, if you could kind of, without maybe, I mean, there's plenty of podcasts where people can listen about your debt free story, but kind of talk about how that sets you up for something like what you just accomplished. Because to me, having no debt and being able to potentially write checks for equipment that you need for a specific project, like talk about the freedom in that. Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think about where to say, but first of all, I don't have a problem with other people, you know, having debt. It's just as a personal thing for me and
I
my
appreciate,
wife.
yeah.
It's, I don't tell somebody you're dumb for having debt, or there's many different ways to run a business, and this is just the way we've decided to do it.
Right. And by the
Um,
way, I 100% respect that, because I know I can say I have debt, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're terrible.
No,
so
dude, you
so I
couldn't do
respect
what
that. Yeah,
you,
yeah,
you know, 2 years in business, you can't do what you're doing that fast without doing that. You
right,
just can't.
yeah,
And I know that. But anyways, as far as like how I don't think, again, going back to saying that, like, I'm so glad we waited until this year to do this project. Cause I say that because I also mean that financially, I don't think I could have done this size of a job completely debt free if it was a year prior.
right,
Um, and that's because like I had to, I had to buy a 10-ton excavator or whatever, 8-ton excavator, um, to do this project. And I could have rented one. I don't think it would have never been near as efficient because it would have just had a thumb or whatever I just ended up with. I did consider that. But we've been, for the last 7 years of, or almost now 8 years of the business, we've been saving for a building, for commercial property. I want to build a building, and I have a big goal of paying cash for it. And so,
sure,
um, over the last 8 years, we're constantly saving, retained earnings for that. And we've been, uh, 3 years ago, we had fully funded our business emergency fund. And so that was really basically what that is my own personal line of credit, if you want to call it
sure,
that.
yeah,
What somebody would have a line of credit for is something I've saved now to have in the business.
that's
And
amazing.
we're able to use that, which it's crazy. And, I'm not going to talk about Dave, a bunch of Dave Ramsey stuff, but he always talks about once you have an emergency fund, you never have to use the emergency fund. And since we've fully funded it, I think I maybe had to touch it one time.
Wow,
But before that, I would have thought I would have been touching
yes,
it all the time. But
right,
anyways, that's a side story. But so anyway, so I was able to dip into that building fund to be able to purchase this excavator, which I knew that this excavator was going to be the most important part for this project, and I needed to have the right setup to make it efficient, and to, this is what I wanted to do. And if I'm, I'd kind of basically, I have money in this pot over here, but I want to, repurpose some of this for this immediate goal that I think could, you know, the return on investment I think would be huge and be able to help me put that money back plus more money, right?
right,
Um, but 2 years prior to this, I wouldn't have had enough to do that or whatever. It's just funny how like timing of it was so right, because I would not have been ready staff wise. I wouldn't have been ready, cash flow wise, a year or two before this to do this kind of a job. Um, and so, I was able to get the right equipment and be able to pay for it. And then it really comes down to making sure you have the right size deposit on the job, um, and making sure that you're, um, managing that deposit appropriately.
right,
It really comes down to that. And not spend, just because I have a deposit on this job, like I have 8 months of overhead and payroll. And, we had a schedule of payments. We had draws that were, as I had two different styles because there were two different jobs basically. One setup was a week, based on time spent in the job. And the other one was, milestones in the
right.
middle of the job. So I get to this point and then I can bill for this much. So, um, that I'm really happy with how I did that. I hesitated to do the milestones, um, type of payment schedule because I knew that there were so many different moving parts in the job, and I was scared that if something didn't get fully done because of whatever reason you want to come up with, then I could have ended up at 95% done, but I really couldn't bill at all because this 5% wasn't done and it wouldn't get done until this got done.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you can get in a little bit of a pickle with that. So I tried to be really methodical about how I set up the contract and how I wanted the payment structure, because I knew that I had to I had to run the business all year
Right.
off of one job,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we still have a maintenance division that runs cash flow through the business, which is that was helpful. Um, but you just I've just had to be really careful about how I set things up, and then I had enough, I have my own retained earnings within the business for emergency fund if we needed to. We never had a dip into that the whole year, which is I was really proud of. And
Yeah.
then we have our building savings that we've been saving. Um, and so we had enough cash within the business to be able to run the job, of course, with the deposit money. And I really want to. I'm not going to go into really much more in depth on that because um, I don't think this is the right platform to do it. But also, I want to. Sometime this winter, I thought about doing some kind of webinar that was where me and my finance manager are on it, and we actually dive into like really how we did it.
Right. That'd be awesome.
There's a lot of like I could not have done this without her. Stephanie is her name, and she's been with me for several years. She's my sister-in-law. She's been, I mean, helping us really since we started the business. But she's a CPA, and then run basically anything to do with money she does within my company. And so I could not have financially managed this project near as well without her and the spreadsheets and um, just managing how we did it monthly and how we brought money into the operations monthly from the deposit. There was just so many different moving parts, and we had a meeting about this before the project started because I was like, okay, Stephanie, like this is the size of the project. This is how much it's going to be. This is when money's going to come in potentially. This is how much the deposit is going to be. Like, how do we run the company all year
Right.
off of this? Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm used to job to job to job. And so then you have more cash flow coming in and moving around. Basically, we had to create cash flow. We had to create cash flow from the money that was coming in and the deposit to make the business feel like it was getting money all the time and not just getting it all at once,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you could immediately think, oh, I now, we have this cash, we have this money, and now I'm going to go buy this or this or whatever you can. But you got to remember, the
Yeah.
whole job is it's 8 months long,
Yeah.
it was 9 months.
And I'm juggling that right now because we're still investing, and it's like,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm getting, what I consider in my career larger deposits and
Yeah,
larger draws, and like trying to balance that. Winter's coming. I have to pay these,
right,
these bills, my overhead, whatever. But then we also need this piece of equipment. I don't want to go into debt for that. It's not that big. So I'm kind of managing that as a cash flow kind of thing in my business. And I've had people ask, I'm sure people ask you all the time. People ask me sometimes, how does Andy run his business debt free? And I just say it was a decision you made based on what I've heard from your story. It was a decision you made, and you were very disciplined in following it through. And from what I understand from your backstory is you had to grow slow to make that happen. Like you had to really
right,
time your growth. And
right,
and it's a decision that you make to say, okay, I don't want to I don't want to be a slave to this thing, or I don't want to have to pay a payment on this, or I don't need that bad enough that I'm going to go into debt for it. But also at the same time, you probably had to do a lot of renting, when you started out, which
yeah,
I'm all for, especially when a company's starting out and they're trying to get projects. Rent that machine, but I always tell them, hey, make sure that you're charging your customer to rent that machine. But then, like, we're using Synced Up now, and it's really helping me to set a budget and then say, okay, I want to buy this piece of equipment. I started saving for a building. We're not going to buy that building this year or tomorrow, but it's
right,
a plan for the future. And so we've said, okay, this much a year we want to set aside to get to that
right,
goal,
right,
and we want this next piece of equipment. And I'm in a position now where I'm buying a new excavator, but I really want to keep my other one. But financially, I just can't make it make sense because I'll have a payment, right? So,
right,
but if you're trying to build a business, then you say, um, not only do you have to charge for that rent, but you really need to be saving for the type of equipment you want to buy. Like you
right,
you, you kind of have to have that in your overhead or your savings or your retained, whatever, however you want to lay
right.
it out for your business. Don't just charge them for rent and say, okay, well, we got that job done by renting. You also need to put in there for the future. And can you explain how you kind of did that starting out even?
Yeah, I mean, we were all probably for I. right away in the beginning of the business, I had bought a used case Bobcat. It was 13 grand or something. And we had money to buy that. So we bought that. And then I didn't buy another piece of like anything like bigger like that for probably 3 years.
Wow.
And so I rented. So we rented, yeah, I think maybe 3 years, two
Wow.
or 3 years. Um, so I rented stuff. I had a friend that had a mini excavator we had borrowed when we would need to. I rented track machines. I rented all kinds of stuff. And then basically there was a project that we were able to secure a commercial job that we are able to make a good chunk of money on, and with other savings, then I was finally able to buy my I think, yeah, I bought my Takeuchi track machine. That was the biggest check I'd ever written. It was like 65,000 or something like that.
Wow.
Um, and we were able to buy that. And then that's when having that piece of equipment was huge, because then not only am I charging what I need to be charging for the piece of equipment, I'm keeping all that money. So then the ball starts rolling. You know what I mean? I'm not
Right.
paying rental payment on, if you're charging $500 or $600 a day for a track machine or whatever, and you're paying, 300 or 400 or whatever, 500, whatever you're paying, instead of only keeping $100, now you're keeping $500 or $600. And so that, if estimating that and charging for your equipment appropriately, and planning for that, and then using that money to keep compounding on itself, and saving for the equipment when you can, and buying it, it was just one piece at a time. And
Right.
I think the next year we bought the mini excavator or something, um, my first mini, and then the next year I found out about NCon and I traded in that mini on my 240 that had a cab, and then the NCon came, and then it's unstoppable after that,
Right.
because you become so efficient, that and you're making the right amount of money and charging the right amount of money, and you don't have any debt, and so then it the whole thing snowballs.
Well, and another thing is if you decide to upgrade a piece of equipment, you're not only selling it, and you're not selling it to pay the note, you're selling it to put it towards a new
Exactly.
piece of equipment, which
Right, exactly.
is a
So
whole
then you don't
nother.
have as
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So I want to sell my Takeuchi, and that's probably worth $50,000 still,
Right.
$45,000. Well, a new one is 75 or whatever it's going to be. Well, now I'm only really having to shell out 20 or 30 grand.
Right.
So then it's easier, it becomes easier to upgrade as you grow.
Right.
Um, and so it's initially it's hard. It takes a while, 8 years is a long time. I just think about that. It's a
Right.
long time. If I end up building a building in the next 2 years, that would be 10 years of saving to do that.
Right.
10 years.
Yes.
Like, you tell somebody, okay, you're going to have this goal, but it's going to take you 10 years to get there. They're gonna be like, no, I don't want to do it.
Oh yeah.
I just want it right now.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's like, well, it's been 10 years, and it's only been 10 years, and we're going to be able to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It thinking ahead 10 years of how long 10 years is to save for a goal, and then getting there, it doesn't feel like it's took that long.
Right. And
But
it's a lot harder to make those decisions when, like, there is one, I listen to Dave Ramsey, and I think he's got a lot of great, I mean, it's a great program, but one of the things he says that always sticks with me is like, ask how much it is, not how much down and how much a month,
Yeah.
and that changes, it completely changes how you buy things, if
100%.
yeah.
And it's kept us committing to this lifestyle. I would consider that to be a lifestyle, because you have to commit to
Right.
living like this. And it starts personally, and it starts with your spouse being on board, but then you have to decide you're going to do it all the time. And it's kept me from buying things so many times that
Yeah.
I really wanted to buy. And it's also kept me from spending more money than what I probably would have.
Right.
Um, like I probably would have bought a something bigger in the beginning, nicer or whatever. Like my first mini, I probably would have bought one with a full cab, and something nicer or whatever I would have done,
Right.
because it doesn't cost as much to pay per month.
Yeah.
But because I'm going to pay for it, I'm like, that hurts a little more.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't really have to have that.
Sure.
But it did what it needed to do, right?
Right.
Um, it's forced me to think longer about things that I do. It's easier now, but again, that's 8 years of work to get to where it's starting to get easier to I can afford to get the nicer stuff now,
Right.
you know, but it wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
It takes time and you have to be committed to it. And there's been many times where my wife is like, no, Andy, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. I'm like, you're right. We're not going to do it. I'm just going to figure out a different way. And I've always figured out a different way.
Yeah.
I just always have,
Yeah.
you know, um, and personally, you have to start. I believe it's better to start on your personal side first, because if you can personally become debt free, then you don't have to suck so much money out of the business when you really want to grow hard.
That's a great I was actually going to ask you if you had some advice for people that maybe wanted to get out of debt. And I think that's a great place to start because
Yeah, because I think many people start businesses and they think they can't pay that, or they either don't pay themselves or thinks they shouldn't pay themselves for a while. But then when they start paying themselves, they have so much personal financial mess that they have to keep taking so much money,
right.
and you can't run your personal life lean to be able to let the business grow to where it needs to grow, and then it becomes easier. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
I didn't have any debt except our home when I started the business. Originally, when we got married, I had a car payment. I had two different cars that we had payments on, um, and we ended up paying those off. And then I traded I traded a nicer pickup, like a 1500, for it was an 8 year older 2500 to start the business, and I traded it straight up, so I didn't have to borrow any
Right.
money for that.
Yeah.
And then that we didn't have any debt except our house then for 4 years, and then we were able to pay off our house. And then after that, then we had no payments.
It's
So then you don't have to, if we have a goal within the business, like, okay, well, for this year, if we don't if we don't take X amount of money more or whatever we want to do, I can put it towards this, and it allows me to buy this piece of equipment, which makes us more money. And then you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
you're able to be more flexible, and you're able to let the business do what it needs to do, and not be sucking it dry all the time of its profits that you need to help reinvest in the company.
Yeah, and then instead of paying payments and interest, you're just reinvesting all of that back into your company. So
Right.
I totally see the advantages of it, and honestly, um, that's it's a goal to get debt free on my end because I just see what you're doing. I see the freedom it brings, and it's really I have a ton of respect for that part of your business, like I said earlier, and what you're doing. So we're over an hour, so I mean we could literally take a few of these topics and make several different episodes about this, but I just really part of my selfish reason for starting this was just because I really enjoy talking to other contractors
Yeah.
and really like talking about their challenges and things like that. And I know that there's this big platform of Instagram and YouTube and all these things that everything can be made to look so big and so awesome and so you know we didn't even talk about tilt rotators. I mean, I think you mentioned one, but like
It's
that's
unbelievable.
a whole nother podcast.
Right.
So but like it's really cool to get in and see. I mean, it's something to see all that online, right? And I even find myself like, oh, do I really want to share this part? This isn't the best, but but I think the things that I've shared that are like me redigging out a pool and lifting it out because it floated, like I shared all that, and I had so many messages of people saying, I'm really glad you shared that because that's showing real life. That's showing
Yeah.
you're owning
Those were
that.
hard.
Yes,
Those were hard
those
days.
are hard days. Yes,
Yeah, man.
and so like you have hard days.
Yep.
You've had. I mean, just imagining what you pushed through in the first 4 or 5 years of your business to stay debt free and to make that decision and stay disciplined. And
Right.
it if somebody starts following you today on Instagram, they're like, how's this guy debt free? Well, that's not the
Right.
whole story. Like
Yeah,
it's
that is
that
a problem.
yes,
I
yeah,
I really believe that's a problem. And sometimes I forget, like, I mean, this is not a brag in any way. Like, somehow our Instagram grew doubled in size this year,
Sure.
and that's really cool. But at the same time, there's double the amount of people that know nothing about how
Right.
we've run our business or how we started. And so it's almost like you almost have to like start over and like
Yeah.
do some kind of talk about whatever, because that's what it is. You have all these people that come in and they start following you and they have no idea what it took to get there. They just see all the shiny stuff and that it all looks cool.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Instagram it's just a highlight reel.
and Caleb Almond actually does a really good job of that, because I'll be
He
watching his stories.
does.
I'll be like, why are you telling us this story again? But then he had like
Right.
10,000 followers over the weekend or something. You're like, oh yeah, that's probably
Right.
like,
Hey, like
I don't really have
introduce
the, I don't
yourself.
really have the follower problem. You know, I'm getting more, you know, we're 25 or 2,600 now. So,
Right.
you know, but it's like,
That none of that stuff means anything.
I know it
Like,
doesn't, but it's like, even
tomorrow, Instagram could delete the app, and
exactly.
we
It,
could all still be friends.
and I think
So
that's why I'm trying to like say, it's really important to have these conversations sometimes, and
yep.
hopefully people listen, and they listen to, you know, an hour and 10 minutes in, and they go, oh yeah, he did start just like I am, or like
Sure.
all of us did. I mean, I started in 1999 with Craig's Lawn Care,
Right.
mowing yards and learning how to put walls in and patios, and it's,
Right.
we all have a different story than what somebody clicks follow on and sees
That's right.
happening right now. And I think
Right.
that's really important to know. So
100%.
yeah.
Nobody sees the hard stuff that you've gone through, or
Yeah.
um, it's just. And every time I get to know somebody that I've have followed on social media for a while, or whatever, and then they, they tell you their story or whatever, and you're like, holy cow, like I had no idea.
Right.
Like I'll never forget. I met Ryan from Rock Structures, Ryan, and we went to Sweden together, and I got to know him more and hear his story, and I was just like, dude, that's wild. Like I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like you've gone through this, this, and this, or you've had this struggle or whatever. Like I just blew my mind. Like, and there's so much knowledge from learning through hard times. Like, it looks like you said, like you could just look at his Instagram and think that he just has all this equipment and all these till rotators and all this fun, awesome stuff. But you don't even know what it took for him to get where he's at right now.
Right.
So,
Yep.
so
Well, I appreciate the time. I think I've taken too much, but I do
you're
appreciate it.
good. It's all good.
It's always great talking to you. And
Yeah, man, you
again,
too.
thank you for letting me come visit the project in October.
Yeah.
Uh, and then to see, like, when we were there, it was like October 18th, 19th, whatever, right before H&A. You were
Yeah.
like, we're gonna finish this by Thanksgiving. I'm like, and I was
I
like, yeah,
said
that's all
I
you
said
did.
that a lot, and I'm like, no way. There's no way. Look
And
at
I
this
was
guy.
like, wow, that's bold. But then you did it like 2 or 3 days early, you know? So
Could not have
congrats.
done that without a lot of help.
Congrats on the project. I want to
Thank
give
you.
you a minute. So you have the Mulder Life podcast, right? That's pretty awesome. Instagram live pretty much every Sunday. You're taking questions. Great format, and you give back a lot to the industry by doing that, because you're in real time answering people's questions, and I'm sure that can be challenging if somebody doesn't watch the week before and you answer the same question, 10 times or whatever.
Yeah,
But
I am often blown away how many different questions can be asked.
yes, so that's awesome. You chronicled your whole project on YouTube, at Mulder Outdoors on YouTube. Obviously,
Yep.
people follow you on Instagram at Mulder Outdoors. Thank you for changing your handle, so I didn't have to say
Yeah,
MM. And
yeah. I still have MMF hats. They're all quickly changing. We are
Yeah.
officially rebranding to Mulder Outdoors. I have a new logo I'll be releasing soon.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so right now I'm not doing any lives through December. I'm not doing lives. Just take a little break for my family and holidays and all that stuff. But we still try and release a podcast once a week on Wednesdays. And
Yeah. So
yeah,
in closing, what's next? I mean, you just completed.
I don't know. I said that to my wife when I finished, and we went on vacation a couple weeks ago, and I told her, I'm like, what do I do now? Like, it was so weird to finish that. It was
Just-
like, I didn't expect, like I said I was going to finish it and I wanted to, but in my heart, I was like, I don't think we're going to get this done. I'm going to keep saying that because I need to lead my team and
Right.
let them to be motivated. We're going to do it. But I'm like, no, we're not. But honestly, I wouldn't have never thought, like, it's not even that I mean, it's been 30s and 40s by us for 3 weeks. We could have still been working and
Right.
whatever. I was so concentrated on getting that job done by Thanksgiving that I didn't even consider the thought of booking other work.
Right.
But it's fine. It's all good. I'm
Yeah.
not
So
complaining.
do you take next year off, or do you have
Yeah,
projects going
no,
on? Or
right. You would think, but we have lots of stuff coming for next year. I'm super thankful and blessed for that. But I think I think the challenge was really good for us, and it grew us so much that now it's almost exciting to go and do smaller jobs, because I feel like we've just gone to another level. And I think it almost is going to feel like I have a pretty sizable job. We probably hopefully start the spring, and sizable, what it used to be sizable, but not anything like what we just did. But that I honestly feel like what we just did is almost a once in a career
Sure.
thing. I don't know if I'll ever do anything like that again.
Right.
And that's exciting and cool to say. But we can't stop. And I think that we're going to take the things that we learned on this one and do better, even better on the next one. Or what I always feel like there's room for improvement. Like I think what we did in that job is near perfection, but there's, I could really critique myself and walk around the job and tell you 3 things that I think I wish we would have done differently.
Sure.
But that's okay.
Yes, that's how you keep getting better, and that's how you keep
right.
growing your
And
company.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
said that or somebody else said that the other day. Like, you can't do it perfect, and if you did, then what would push you to keep doing better? I don't know.
Right.
Somebody said that.
Yeah.
But I just think that's what I think I love about this career so much is it's always changing. There's always something new you can do, and there's always something you could do better.
Yep. And
So
every project offers. I walked into the project we're on, and I was like, we have amazing access. We're going to do it in the middle of the summer, and I told the guys, I guess this should be pretty straightforward. It has been. I will never say that again.
Is that the one with the pool
Yeah.
that had come out? That
Yeah.
one, yeah.
Yeah, this job has been it's been
the
the most challenging project I've ever done in my life. And it's like, okay. And it's a corner lot. We're literally driving in the side yard. I mean, it's one of the easiest accesses. We have room for everything, and it's been the most challenging thing.
I'm not
I've
gonna
ever
lie,
done.
Craig, when you started that, when you came back to start it and take the pool out, in my head on my job, I'm like, okay, we're never gonna finish. I'm never gonna get this done by Thanksgiving. But then I was like, wait a minute. Craig just started this giant job, and he's got to take the pool out and put it back in. I'm like, and he's going to get it done. Like, okay, maybe we can do this. And like, I kept second guessing myself on like what we can get done. And it just comes down to like, everybody has a goal and a good team and the right amount of, it just happened.
And when you started your project in late February, you seemed really gung ho and a little like, I don't know, on edge or nervous or whatever. You're like, this is a big undertaking, and we're doing what I call large projects. And I was like, hey, just remember, I think I texted you and said, you're not going to get it done in a week. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, you did send that to me a couple times, I think. Yeah, you're right.
Because it's like, you have to really go, okay, this is like, I kind of started breaking projects down into like, this is next. And then this is next. And then, because if you think about the whole thing, like I kind of break them into little projects, hardscape, pool, landscaping, and kind of walk through them that way, because it can be really overwhelming if you sit there and think.
Super. This job was such a mental game for me.
Yeah.
And I thought I was prepared in the beginning, like mentally, and within 3 weeks, I'm like, I need to slow down. I'm not where I need to be mentally.
Yep.
And lots of worrying and talking to my wife and letting her talk me off the ledge. And, a lot of that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much, and thanks for sharing a little bit of the process of the project and just kind of your how it's kind of changing the way you're working and doing things. And it's always fun to see you and talk to you, and all I can say is thank you. Appreciate it.
You don't need to thank me. But thanks for having me on here. This is great.
Yep.
Absolutely, man.
All right. I hope 2023 is. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be big things for you, and hopefully this other project. And we always enjoy watching you. This winter, I'm anxious to see how well you clean everything and maintenance everything, and how clean your shop is. And it's always fun to see you kind of regroup, and take the time to do that, so that next year can get off to a good start. So hope 2023 is great, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you for listening today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at backyard.conversations. I'd also like to thank Andy Mulder for being our guest today and Synced Up for sponsoring this episode. You can find more information on Synced Up by following the link in our show notes. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.